I didn't expect fireworks on my birthday. But I also didn't expect silence so loud it could choke you. No messages. No calls. No happy birthday posts. Nothing. Just the same suffocating quiet I'd grown used to every single year while downstairs, laughter exploded like fireworks, for him. My brother, Ryan. The golden child. He was born just 1 week after me, same month, same year, but in our parents' eyes, he was born into sunlight while I was carved from shadow. From the moment we were kids, the difference was clear. When Ryan turned 10, my parents rented a whole amusement park. A real one. Cotton candy, clowns, fireworks, the works. When I turned 10, Mom forgot to even bake a cake. "Sweetheart, we'll celebrate later," she'd said that night, distracted by the invoices for Ryan's party decorations. Later never came. It never did. Every year after that, my birthday vanished into the background like a smudge on the calendar no one cared to erase. Now, at 24, nothing had changed. From the crack of dawn, the house buzzed with energy. Balloons, banners, and trays of catered food filled every corner. Ryan's birthday bash was trending on Instagram before I'd even brushed my teeth. And me? I just sat in my room upstairs, same date, same house, scrolling through my notifications like an idiot, pretending it didn't hurt. No one cared that today my actual birthday came first. In their eyes, the only birthday worth remembering was his. "Ella. Can you help set up the photo wall?" That was Mom. Her voice floated up the stairs like an order, not a request. I glanced at the mirror. My eyes were puffy from last night's crying session, but I forced a smile anyway. "Sure, Mom." Because that's what I always did: smile, obey, fade into the background. When I walked downstairs, the sight hit me like déjà vu wrapped in humiliation. The living room was a shrine to Ryan, giant banners of his face, lead letters spelling "Happy Birthday, Champ," and a 3-tier cake shaped like a football. Ryan was lounging on the couch in a designer jacket, grinning at his friends. "Hey, sis," he said, barely glancing at me. "Can you grab me a drink?" No happy birthday. No acknowledgement. Just another errand girl in her own home. I handed him a soda and forced a laugh. "Sure. Anything else, Your Majesty?" His friends snickered. "She's funny," one of them said. Ryan winked. "She tries. That's the thing about being invisible, you start to memorize the sound of being ignored." Dad walked by with his phone pressed to his ear, barking orders about the caterers. Mom hovered over the cake, adjusting candles that cost more than my entire outfit. No one looked at me. No one ever did. Until I heard something that made my stomach twist. "She's lucky to even be invited," Mom whispered to Aunt Carol near the buffet table. Honestly, I didn't even think she'd still be living here. Lucky. Lucky that my own parents let me stand in the corner of my brother's birthday party on my birthday. I slipped out onto the balcony, the laughter fading behind me. The night air was cool, the sky scattered with city lights. That's when my phone buzzed. A single notification. "Happy birthday, Ella Yellow Heart." It was from Maya, my only real friend since high school. She never forgot. I smiled, my throat tightening. "Thanks, at least someone remembered," I whispered. Then she texted again. "Wait, are they doing it again? Ryan's party, today?" I hesitated before typing back. "Yeah. They always do." Her reply came instantly. "Girl. You're way too calm for someone being erased every year." Erased. That word hit deeper than she knew. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Every candle Ryan blew out took another piece of me with it. When I went back inside, the party was in full swing. Music, laughter, flashing lights, everything screamed celebration. And then, Mom clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. "Everyone. Let's toast to our wonderful son Ryan. You've made us so proud, sweetheart. Another year of success, another year of blessings." Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Ryan smirked and threw an arm around her. "Couldn't have done it without you, Mom." I just stood there, holding my empty glass, heart pounding. Another year, another ghost birthday. But then Ryan turned, caught my eye, and grinned that smug grin. "Hey, Ella," he said into the mic. "Sorry, forgot your birthdays, what next week?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. I smiled back, but my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Yeah, I said softly. Next week. But inside, a new kind of fire was lighting up, quiet, controlled, and deadly. Because this time, I wasn't just going to fade into the background. This time, they'd remember me. They'd never forget my birthday again. The morning after Ryan's birthday bash, I found the house looking like a war zone, streamers hanging half-torn, empty glasses stacked like ruins, and confetti crushed into the carpet. It smelled like champagne and favoritism. As usual, I was the one cleaning it all up. Mom was still asleep. Dad had already gone to work. Ryan? He was passed out on the couch, snoring loudly under a golden blanket that literally had his initials embroidered into it. When I reached for the trash bags, I noticed something glinting under the table, a velvet box. I picked it up, assuming it was another one of his expensive gifts. It was. Inside sat a silver Rolex, shining like it owned the room. The tag read, "To Ryan, from Mom and Dad." My chest tightened. They'd forgotten my birthday again. But somehow, they remembered to spend thousands on him again. By afternoon, Ryan finally woke up, rubbing his eyes and yawning like royalty. "Morning, Ella," he said, stretching. "Or, afternoon, I guess. You didn't clean the balcony yet." I bit my tongue. "I'm getting there." He smirked and reached for the Rolex, snapping it around his wrist. "Looks good, hey?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "It does." He didn't even notice the flatness in my tone. "Oh, by the way," he added casually, "Mom said you can grab leftover cake for lunch. She's out shopping with Dad." "Shopping? For what?" He shrugged. "Didn't ask." But I did ask later, and that's when things started to feel off. That evening, I overheard them in the living room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I just happened to walk by. Mom's voice was low but sharp. "Are you sure this is necessary? He's already got one." Dad sighed. "It's an investment, honey. The more we give Ryan now, the better he'll handle the business later." Business? That word again. Ryan wasn't exactly the business type. He was charming, yes, but also reckless. He changed jobs like outfits. The idea that my parents were investing in him sounded ridiculous, and unfair. "Ella wouldn't understand," Dad continued. "She's different." Different. That one stung worse than forgotten birthdays. I stepped away quietly before they saw me, heart pounding, the words echoing in my head, "She's different." Over the next few days, the red flags multiplied. Mom kept taking mysterious phone calls, always stepping outside when I was around. When I asked who it was, she'd smile too sweetly. "Just business, sweetheart." Ryan had started acting secretive too. He was constantly texting someone, grinning at his phone, then locking the screen whenever I looked. One night, while he was out, I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter labeled "Tuition payment $18,000." It wasn't mine. Ryan hadn't been in school for 2 years. So why were Mom and Dad still paying his tuition? I tried to ignore it, but resentment has a way of chewing through even your calmest thoughts. Every morning, I left for my shift at the coffee shop at 6 a.m. Every night, I came home to Ryan playing video games, yelling at the screen, living like he didn't have a single worry in the world. And my parents still called him responsible. The final straw came one Friday night when I overheard Ryan in the garage, arguing on the phone. "Bro, I told you, I'll get the cash soon. My parents are transferring it this week." "Yeah," I said, "it's for school. Don't worry, they won't check." My heart nearly stopped. The tuition payment. It wasn't school money, it was cover money. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I tried to talk to Mom first, carefully. "Hey, Mom," I began while helping her fold laundry. "I think Ryan's, maybe hiding something? He mentioned tuition money." Her hands froze mid-fold. "Ella." She smiled tightly. "Don't start this again." "Start what?" "Comparing yourself to your brother. You always twist things to make him look bad." That hit harder than I expected. "Mom, I'm not." She cut me off, voice sharp now. "Ryan's under a lot of pressure right now. You should be supporting him, not judging him." I blinked. "Pressure? He hasn't had a job in 6 months." Her eyes hardened. "You wouldn't understand." There it was again. You wouldn't understand. Like I was born missing a piece of the puzzle that made me worth caring about. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation, Mom's defensiveness, Ryan's lies, Dad's investments. Something deeper was going on. Something they didn't want me to see. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Their loyalty wasn't about love, it was about control. And I was the expendable one. Still, I couldn't shake one thought that crawled into my mind and refused to leave. If my own family could lie so easily, what else were they hiding? As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint sound of laughter floated up from Ryan's room below his muffled voice, the hum of music, another carefree night bought with someone else's money. And just like that, my heart hardened another inch. Because now it wasn't just about a forgotten birthday. It was about betrayal wearing a familiar smile. And I was starting to see the cracks in the perfect family picture. Cracks I intended to widen. It started with a wrong email. The kind of accident that changes everything. It was a Monday morning. I was sipping stale coffee before work when my phone buzzed, an email from Dad's assistant, forwarded by mistake. The subject line read: "Finalized transfer, joint birthday fund, Ryan." I frowned. Joint birthday fund? The message inside was short. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, the $25,000 transfer has been completed to Ryan's account as discussed. Should I still remove Ella's name from the annual trust renewal?" I reread it 3 times. Remove my name? Trust renewal? My hands went cold. The coffee cup slipped from my fingers, splattering across the counter, but I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, staring at the email, heart hammering so hard it hurt. When I confronted Mom that evening, she didn't even look surprised. "Where did you see that?" she asked calmly, folding towels like we weren't talking about something life-changing. "Your assistant sent it by mistake," I said, voice shaking. "Why would you remove me from a trust fund I didn't even know existed?" She sighed. "Ella, it's complicated." "No," I snapped. "It's not complicated, it's theft. My own parents are stealing from me." "Don't use that word," she said sharply. "This isn't stealing. It's reallocation." "Reallocation?" I laughed, but it came out broken. "So Ryan gets everything, and I get nothing." Mom didn't answer. Instead, she looked at me with that same expression she always did when I disappointed her, a mix of pity and irritation. "You've always been independent, Ella. You don't need our help the way Ryan does." I stared at her, stunned. "You're rewarding him for being irresponsible." Her tone hardened. "He's family, Ella." "So am I," I whispered. Dad came home halfway through the argument. Mom filled him in before I could even speak. He rubbed his temples. "Ella, calm down. This isn't about favoritism." "Then what is it about?" "Ryan is the one taking over the family business one day. It only makes sense that the assets." "What business?" I cut in. "He doesn't even have a job." Dad's eyes flashed with annoyance. "You wouldn't understand." Those words again. Always the same excuse for betrayal. He turned to leave, but I couldn't let it end there. "So that's it?" I shouted. "You've just decided I don't exist financially? You're giving everything to Ryan because I'm not your trophy child?" Dad stopped at the doorway, voice low and final. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." The door clicked behind him. And just like that, the last bit of hope I'd been clinging to, collapsed. Later that night, I found Ryan in the kitchen, raiding the fridge like nothing was wrong. "Hey, sis," he said, smirking. "Rough night?" I glared at him. "You knew, didn't you?" He froze for half a second, then shrugged. "Knew what?" "About the trust fund." He smiled lazily. "Oh, that. So you did know." "Look, Mom and Dad just want what's best for everyone. I'm going to manage the money better. You'd probably just waste it on what do you even do again? Latte art." My jaw tightened. "You're unbelievable." He laughed. "Come on, Ella. Don't act shocked. You know how it is. You're the side note, I'm the story." That line hit harder than any slap could. The side note. That's what I was to them. Background noise in a family that only tuned in for him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, staring out into the quiet neighborhood, every memory of past birthdays replaying in painful detail. The missed cakes. The excuses. The fake smiles. They weren't accidents. They were symptoms of something deeper, a family that had chosen their favorite long before I even had a chance. And now, they'd made it official. They'd erased me on paper, just like they'd erased me emotionally for years. The next morning, Ryan was bragging to a friend over speakerphone while I walked past his room. "Yeah, it's official now," he said. "Dad transferred the full amount." I told him I'd invest some of it. Haha, yeah right. I'm booking that Dubai trip tonight. I stopped dead in the hallway. That was my future he was laughing about. My inheritance. My security. All gone, traded for a luxury vacation and an ego trip. I walked to work in a daze that day, barely noticing the world around me. The street noises blurred, the wind bit cold, but inside, something else burned, a mix of fury and clarity. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was done. Done being the forgotten daughter. Done playing small so they could feel big. As I wiped tables and smiled for customers I didn't care about, I made a quiet promise to myself. They wanted to forget me? Fine. But when I came back into their lives, it would be in a way they'd never forget. They took everything from me, but what they didn't know was that sometimes, being invisible makes you the most dangerous person in the room. Because while they were busy celebrating Ryan, I was planning something else. Something that would make them remember my birthday forever. The morning after the betrayal, the house felt different. Not quieter, no, silence had always lived here, but colder. Like even the air had chosen sides. I packed my coffee thermos for work, but my hands trembled too much to screw the lid on straight. My reflection in the kitchen window looked like a stranger, pale face, hollow eyes, lips pressed tight around words I'd never been allowed to say. For years, I'd survived on scraps of attention. A pat on the head here, a polite smile there. I told myself love didn't have to be equal to be real. But now I saw the truth, love shouldn't have to be earned. And mine never counted. At the cafe, I moved through my shift like a ghost, pouring lattes, forcing smiles, burning my fingers twice because my mind wouldn't stop replaying Ryan's voice. "You're the side note, I'm the story." He was right, in a way. That's how my family had always written it. But stories can change. Around noon, Maya dropped by, her familiar smile grounding me for a second. "Girl, you look like you fought a tornado," she said, sliding onto a stool. "What happened?" I told her everything, the trust fund, the favoritism, the email, all of it. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, eyes dark with anger. When I finished, she said softly, "So they took your name off the papers. You going to let them take your dignity, too?" I blinked. What am I supposed to do? They own everything. Not everything. She leaned closer. You've got the one thing they'll never have, yourself. Your work ethic. Your brain. They underestimate you, and that's their biggest mistake. Her words hit deeper than she knew. For so long, I'd accepted the role they gave me, quiet, harmless, forgotten. But what if being overlooked was my advantage? That night, when I got home, the house was empty. A note on the counter read: "Gone to dinner with Ryan to discuss investments. Don't wait up." Investments. The word made bile rise in my throat. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. But as I did, something inside me snapped, not out of rage this time, but out of resolve. They thought I was powerless. That I'd just swallow another betrayal and move on. But I wasn't their doormat anymore. I went upstairs and pulled out an old photo album from the back of my closet. Ryan and Ella, the early years. In every photo, Ryan was in the center. I was always on the edge, smiling small, cropped by someone else's shadow. I flipped through the pages until I reached the last one, our 10th birthday. His side of the table was covered in balloons, cake, and wrapped gifts. My side? A single cupcake with a candle that hadn't even been lit. The memory punched the air from my lungs. But then I noticed something I'd never seen before: Dad's handwriting on the back of the photo. "For our son, who deserves the world." No mention of me. The ache turned into clarity. They'd never forgotten my birthday. They'd ignored it deliberately. Every year, every excuse, every "oh, we'll celebrate later." This wasn't about forgetfulness. It was about priorities. I was never their celebration. I was their inconvenience. And that realization didn't destroy me. It freed me. The next day, I skipped work. I took the bus across town to the courthouse. If I was being erased, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. After a few hours and some awkward questions, a clerk handed me the document, the Whitman Family Trust. I scanned it, and there it was in black and white. Beneficiary, Ryan Whitman. Previous beneficiary, Ella Whitman, removed on January 15th. The date hit me like a slap. January 15th. My birthday. They had removed my name from the trust on my birthday. The irony was cruel. Perfectly cruel. I pressed my trembling fingers to the paper. For a long time, I just stood there, frozen between grief and fury. Then, slowly, the storm inside me stilled. If that was the game they wanted to play, I could play it better. That night, I sat by the window with my laptop open. My hands didn't shake anymore. I started typing a list of every lie, every transfer, every whispered call I'd overheard. Then I started digging. Ryan's business deals. Dad's company accounts. The tuition payments. Piece by piece, the puzzle started forming a picture uglier than I expected. There were offshore transfers under fake project names. Payments labeled consulting that led nowhere. And Ryan's account was linked to almost all of them. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. It wasn't just favoritism. It was fraud. And my family had used my silence to hide it. For the first time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. I'd spent years begging for scraps of love from people who didn't deserve my loyalty. Now, they were going to learn what it felt like to be forgotten. But not by accident. By design. Because this time, I wasn't the side note. I was the rewrite. And my story was just beginning. The hardest part of a storm is the quiet before it, when everyone else is still humming along, oblivious that the weather is changing. That quiet became my laboratory. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted proof, cold, undeniable, boring paperwork that would make their pretty excuses look like the lies they were. So I made a list and crossed things off with the strange, steady calm of someone who knows the exact shape of the problem. Step 1. Corroborate the email. The forwarded message was my opening, but one email could be dismissed as a mistake. I needed a thread. I started by requesting copies of local transactions I'd seen referenced, the tuition payment, the consulting transfers, anything that touched Ryan's account. I did it the quiet way: phone calls with a sympathetic teller, Maya's cousin worked at a bank branch and owed us a favor, online searches, and old-fashioned note-taking. Every little receipt, every transfer ID, the dates January 15 kept popping up like a scar. Step 2. Follow the money trail. I mapped transfers onto a timeline. Dad's company had vendor payments that didn't match invoices. Some were routed to shell companies with names so dull they sounded like accounting errors: Evergreen Consulting, Hillcrest Partners. The money moved in neat, predictable stages: Dad's company, vendor entity, Ryan's account. The sums were never huge individually, but together they added up like a slow leak, draining everything I might have had. Step 3. Find witnesses. Paper is powerful, but people make it bulletproof. I needed someone with access who would talk without being crushed by family pressure. That's where Maya came through again. She introduced me to Lena, an old temp who'd worked as Dad's assistant before the new shiny one took over. Lena stayed vague the first few meetings, scared and apologetic, but then she gave me a name and a date. There were memos, a list of beneficiaries we were told to update. I didn't read it, but I saw Ella's name crossed out. Lena's frightened whisper felt like a match in dry grass. Step 4. Recruit a professional. I could gather receipts until my fingers bled, but real change needed a professional stamp. I contacted a small forensic accountant, someone who didn't care about social standing, only ledgers. She looked through my stack of printouts and typed with the silence of someone used to bad family secrets. "This pattern looks like related party transfers," she said, words I didn't fully grasp then but which made the hair on my arm stand up. She agreed to produce a report we could present to a bank's compliance department or a lawyer. Step 5. Stage the bait without crossing my own line. I refused to become a criminal to catch one. I also knew confrontation without pressure would get me nowhere. So I built a trap of daylight and procedure, a simple legal letter. My lawyer, yes, I'd found one who took my case pro bono after I showed the initial email, drafted a formal request, reproduce bank records for specific vendors and transactions. It was cold, formal, and bureaucratic, the kind of thing that triggers audits and internal reviews. It was also the kind of thing that made people who had something to hide very, very nervous. As I put the letter in the post, I pictured Ryan asleep under his embroidered blanket, already checking flight deals for Dubai. He still moved through the world as if luck and their money barred consequences. He wore his new Rolex like a challenge. While the bank and legal wheels creaked into motion, I layered on pressure from other angles. I archived voicemails, saved texts, and copied the tuition receipts. I made silent lists of times when Mom stepped outside to take a call, of the exact dates certain invoices had been created. I printed copies and stored them in 3 different places: my apartment, a safety deposit box I rented under a fake small business name for research, and with Lena. If one copy disappeared, 2 would remain. The villain still felt in control. Ryan posted pictures of champagne and beaches, tagged my parents in a selfie, and bragged about investments in group chats where he mentioned me only to mock me. Dad sent me a curt text, "We'll talk when things have calmed down." Mom called once, voice syrupy, "Everything will be fine, sweetheart. Don't make waves." There yes men around the house. The caterer, the social media cliques kept retweeting the same narrative: Ryan is the heir, Ella's drama is attention-seeking. That smug certainty became my fuel. I didn't need to humiliate them in public yet. The legal letter was the first domino. The forensic report would be the second. If the bank's compliance team found discrepancies, internal investigations would follow. If money was flagged, transactions could be frozen. If frozen, the family ledger would be laid bare in a way only numbers can do. If numbers failed, Lena would testify. If testimony lagged, my lawyer had a plan to escalate. There was an art to patience. Every piece in my plan had to be precise, legal, and unstoppable. No theatrics, just inevitability. That way, when the fall happened, they couldn't claim hurt feelings or forgetful mistakes. They would have to face ledgers, dates, and signatures, their own tidy handwriting staring back at them. At night, I pictured the calendar flipping toward the moment of truth. I could hear the faint hum of the house below, Ryan laughing, Dad's phone buzzing, Mom's soft footsteps. They still thought they were unassailable. But quiet, careful work turns into a storm just the same as a single lightning strike. I wasn't done being invisible. I was becoming precise. And the closer I got, the more I realized the worst thing for them would be the look on my face when I finally set the dominoes in motion, a look that said, plainly, "You should have never erased me." They chose to celebrate on a Saturday another opulent party for Ryan, another night of glitter and speeches. It was the kind of event where people wore success like armor and cameras puzzled over every smile. I'd watched them build stages out of money for years. Tonight, the stage would collapse under its own weight. I arrived early, dressed in a plain black dress and sneakers, hair pulled back. Plain was part of the plan. When everyone expected drama, I gave them calm. I'd given my lawyer and the forensic accountant the final packet 2 days earlier. We'd done everything by the book: subpoenas served, compliance flagged, a quiet court order waiting in the wings. I wasn't there to shout, I was there to let the evidence speak. The room smelled of perfume and pine-scented candles. Ryan was already on the riser with a mic, practicing a speech about new ventures and family legacy, his laugh loud enough to be recorded. Mom floated through clusters of guests, refixing hair and laughing a little too loudly. Dad stood in the corner, phone in hand, looking like the king of a fortress that would soon be breached. I sat at a table close enough to see every twitch. Maya sat beside me, lips pressed, hands steady. Lena, pale, shaking but committed, was in the front row. My lawyer gave me a single nod. The forensic accountant had a laptop and a calm face that suggested she'd done this kind of damage before. Ryan launched into a joke about not needing anyone's help. The room laughed. Cameras found their favorite angles. I felt my pulse slow. The storm I'd built was arriving on schedule. At the moment Ryan raised his glass to toast, 2 men in plain suits stood near the entrance and tapped a shoulder. One held a small envelope and a legal document. Murmurs ricocheted across the hall like thrown pebbles. "Excuse me," one said into a voice that belonged to the courtroom, "not a party. We have a notice of compliance review served to Whitman Enterprises and related accounts." He handed a copy to Dad. Dad's smile tightened. "This is a mistake," he said automatically. "We're..." "No," the second man interrupted, and his voice carried in a way that didn't invite correction. "This is a formal review request. We need to ask you a few questions." Ryan's laugh stalled. Cameras pivoted. My lawyer stood, walked to the microphone, and asked for everyone's attention. The room quieted, curiosity a living thing. We've learned of a series of related party transfers, she said, voice steady and cold. Payments labeled as consulting and tuition have been routed through vendor accounts and ultimately deposited into personal accounts tied to Mr. Ryan Whitman. We have a forensic report. She turned the laptop screen toward the crowd, which confirms the pattern. The forensic accountant clicked, and the big screen behind the riser filled with a clean, merciless timeline, vendor names, dates, arrows, dollar amounts. January 15th stared back in bold on each suspicious row. A table of transfers unfurled like a list of crimes in plain sight. The crowd's murmur escalated into a roar of disbelief. Ryan's smile faltered, Mom's color drained. You can't show that here, Dad whispered, voice cracking between anger and panic. It's already been shown to the bank's compliance department, the accountant said. They've placed temporary holds on the flagged accounts pending investigation. We've also filed for a preliminary injunction to freeze transfers related to these vendors. Gasps. Cell phones rose like birds. Someone started a live stream, someone else whispered, "Oh my God, the Whitmans." Ryan swore. He tried to laugh it off as a misunderstanding. Guys, it's family accounting. On January 15th, the trust document was amended, my lawyer said, sliding a printed copy toward the judge of views in attendance. We have proof the amendment removing Ella Whitman as a beneficiary was executed the same day on her birthday, with transfers immediately following through shell vendors to Mr. Whitman's account. That's not an accounting error. That's a pattern. The room angled toward me as if someone had struck a chord that pulled everyone's eyeballs. For a second, I felt like a foreign object in the center of a glass sphere, visible, fragile, impossible to ignore. Dad's face went ashen. Mom covered her mouth, the practiced smile slipping. Ryan reached for his phone, but two compliance officers blocked his path. "Sir, you're required to remain until we complete our questioning," one said. The cameras found the line and the sound of plastic clicking record buttons, capturing every moment. Ivory chandeliers cast theater light, the music from an earlier playlist lay silent as a grave. Friends of the family clustered, exchanging skeptical looks. Some faces hardened into disbelief, others softened as sympathy crept in. The caterers nervously adjusted napkins with hands that looked suddenly very small. Lena stood up. Her voice trembled, but it reached everyone. "I saw the memos," she said, eyes on Mom. "I wasn't supposed to read them, but I saw Ella's name crossed out. They told me to update the files." Mom's laugh broke into a keening sound that had nothing to do with merriment. "Lena, no, this isn't how it happened. My father tried to salvage control, to call a private meeting, to bribe the narrative back into shape. But the legal papers had already taken root. The bank freeze meant Ryan couldn't transfer funds, the injunction meant assets were under investigation, the live stream meant this mess would not dissolve into whispers." Ryan's friends drifted away, cameras still pointed. The man who had worn my family's favor like an invisible crown now stood exposed, his swagger gone. The Rolex on his wrist looked ridiculous heavy with implication, light on protection. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply sat there, the quiet at my core a counterpoint to the chaos around me. People's eyes kept finding mine like stray drones searching a target. Some were pitying. Some were ashamed. Some glowered, protective of a myth that had been shattered. My mother's hands shook as she grabbed for Dad's arm, her voice dissolving into apologies I'd never wanted. "Ella," she began, but the words landed on the floor and scattered like dry leaves. I rose then, slowly, and walked to the microphone they'd used for toasts. The room sucked in a breath that sounded like the ocean pulling out before a storm. "Happy birthday to me," I said, undercutting the hall with a single calm sentence. The words were small and giant at once. They landed, and the sound in the room changed an intake, a remembering. Cameras clicked. Someone's live chat filled with heart emojis and shocked faces. The dominoes had fallen. Papers, phones, and voices now kept them from erasing me. I had not needed to shout in the street to be heard. Numbers had done it for me. Evidence had done it for me. The family that had made me invisible had built the stage for their own exposure. As security led Ryan to a quiet room for questioning and the compliance officers began inventorying accounts, I felt a strange lightness, not victory exactly, but release. The moment I'd planned for with cold patience had arrived, and with it, a terrible, necessary clarity. They'd celebrated like they owned the world. Tonight, they watched it buckle. And for the first time in my life, I watched them buckle with my eyes open. When the dust settled, the Whitman family name no longer glittered, it cracked. Ryan's accounts were frozen pending full investigation. The bank's internal audit confirmed the misappropriations I'd uncovered, not small errors, but deliberate, structured siphoning. Dad resigned from his position on the board within the week. Mom stopped showing up to social events altogether. Their empire wasn't gone overnight, but it was bleeding fast, and every headline that followed pressed deeper into the wound. Whitman family under investigation for fraudulent transfers. Favoritism and funds, inside the family rift exposed on Livestream. The footage from Ryan's birthday party had gone viral. Someone uploaded it within hours, and by morning, it had 5 million views. There I was on screen, calm, collected, almost eerily still as my family unraveled behind me. People in the comments called it the quietest mic drop in YouTube history. For years, they'd celebrated him in front of the world and hidden me in the shadows. This time, the world watched them fall, and it watched me rise. I moved out the following week. I didn't take much, just my essentials, a few books, and my grandmother's locket. The house that once felt like a prison was now a mausoleum of broken pride. Every marble counter, every crystal chandelier, seemed to whisper apologies they were too proud to say. Ryan tried calling me once. Just once. When I answered, his voice was trembling, not angry, just hollow. They're saying I could face charges, Ella. You could have just. Just what? I cut in. Let you steal my inheritance? Let you erase me again? He went silent for a long moment before saying, you wanted to humiliate us. No, I said quietly. I wanted you to remember me. And I hung up. By month's end, the investigation concluded, Ryan had used falsified invoices and shell vendors to move over $1.2 million from my trust and my late grandmother's estate. Dad had authorized many of the transfers without reading the fine print. Family business, he'd said at the time. Now it was a legal liability. The court's decision came down harder than I expected. Ryan's assets were seized. Dad was fined for negligence and barred from holding a corporate role for 5 years. Mom's name was quietly removed from 3 charity boards she'd once chaired. The irony? The trust they'd gutted was legally reinstated to me. The same fund that once paid for Ryan's parties and ventures was now mine to control. But I didn't spend it on revenge. I spent it on rebirth. I used a portion to start an organization that sponsors scholarships for overlooked students, kids who were always the other child, the quiet one, the forgotten one. I called it Project JAN15. People asked what the date meant. I'd just smile and say, it's when I learned who I was. I was invited to speak at a university event a few months later, a guest lecture on financial ethics, of all things. When I walked up to the podium, I saw rows of young faces, eager, uncertain, curious. I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I told them that silence in the face of injustice only feeds it. That sometimes, standing up for yourself doesn't mean shouting, it means documenting. Afterward, a girl came up to me, maybe 19, her eyes bright with tears. My parents always forget my birthday too, she said softly. I thought I didn't matter. I smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. You matter. You just haven't reminded the world yet. News eventually quieted, but whispers never stopped. Some said I'd destroyed my own family. Others said I'd saved myself. Both were true. Ryan moved abroad, trying to rebuild a career that would never escape the digital stain of his downfall. Mom and Dad sold the mansion, downsizing, the papers said, but everyone knew better. Me? I bought a small apartment by the harbor. Nothing extravagant, just mine. Every year since, I've hosted a small birthday dinner on January 15th. No gifts, no speeches, no glittering guests. Just a table filled with laughter, light, and people who choose to show up. Because that's the thing about being forgotten, once you rise from it, you never forget how to see the invisible ones. One night, I stood by my window watching the city lights flicker across the water. A notification buzzed on my phone, a comment under the viral video that had started it all. It read: she didn't want revenge. She wanted justice with elegance. I smiled. Maybe that's what this story was all along. Not about hate. But about balance, about setting the scales right again. And as I looked at the reflection in the glass, stronger, freer, seen, I whispered the line that had lived in my chest since that first forgotten birthday. They forgot my birthday every year, but this time, the world remembered. Clapperboard to my viewers. Have you ever been the one they overlooked? The one they took for granted until you finally stood your ground? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. Speech balloon. And if you believe in poetic justice, in karma coming full circle, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Because here on this channel every forgotten voice gets the spotlight it deserves.